So I'm Sarah Legge. I'm from the University of Sydney. My overarching thesis title is Total Lifetime Productivity and Profitability. So I basically look at a lot of farm data from Leppington Pastoral Company, Ron is in my next group, and I go through and look at what we can use to predict the outcomes on farm. So did you know that the first 5 days in a calf feeder could change the profitability of your farm based on the number of lactations that animal will make? Now you do. So at this farm, for a little bit of background, the first 10 days of life, they are in an individual calf pen. They are fed a set amount of milk. The management overall is super consistent. They track this, they tube them, they test immunity. They do not reach a group stage unless they have got immunity transfer. So they're not put into a robot until they know that this animal is friendly with life. It's going to survive, it's going to make it. Once they're in the calf feeder though, the game is completely different. They're in there with 25 of their closest friends. And the issue that we had and why Michael came to us originally was the fact that when he got to weaning, he was noticing visible differences in size, which is kind of scary when you think about how strict they are in management and how consistent they thrive to be. So getting animals that are weaning anywhere from 60 to 118 kilograms, that's a bit surprising, and we want to know why. So I went into the data and I looked at what was causing this variability. And two things really strung out to me immediately. The birth weight, can't change that, can you? Once they're on the ground, there's not a whole lot we can do. They are as they've come. But the two things we can change is how they're drinking and how they're interacting with the robot. So the other variable that I noticed was really well correlated with how they weaned and how they thrived as an adult was half-day consumption, so how they are interacting with the robot ultimately. So I looked at this and I went, okay, what are our successful animals doing? Now we have got a bit of a Goldilocks thing with calves. You don't want them weaning really, really heavy. You don't need a fat heifer. If you're getting a fat heifer, you're going to have issues calving her. That's going to be no fun for anyone, extra work. You don't want a really light heifer at the end of weaning because she's going to be harder to get in calf. See where we're going? We need that middle group. We need that 80 kilogram weaning weight animal. We want consistency. So I was fortunate enough on the bus ride over here today to sit next to Fernando, the manager at LPC, and go over my data with him. And at the end of that conversation, we were thinking, you know what? The number that's singing out to us is the number 30. 30 kilograms of milk. That's how much we want them to be drinking after 5 days in the feeder. Not 5 days of life, 5 days in the feeder. This was when it became most statistically significant to do something about these animals. That's when your weaning weight animals all splayed off in different directions. We were pretty consistent till day 5, and that's when they really branch out and you start seeing your high performers and your low performers of your animals. So now our next step is really looking at whether we can put an intervention in place of someone going in and going, all right, bit of spray paint on this calf, and this calf. Let's get them interacting with that robot, let's get them familiar with it, or ultimately going, do we need to move some of these other animals out? Do we need to make this a fair playing field? The other variable that I do have, which is less significant with lactations, is robot visitation. So this is ultimately how they're interacting with the robot, how the machine's reading their NLS tag, and how it's working. So what we found there was even the calves that had drank everything, they kept going back for more. They clued on to the fact that that robot was mum. Mum has the milk, we want that. So that was a pretty obvious one, you'd think. Calf goes into feeder a lot, calf is going to gain a lot. But luckily, we can actually tell that at day 3 in the feeder, that what's going to succeed are the ones hitting over 15 visits cumulative to 3 days. So the ones that have hit that, they're our succeeding ones. The ones that aren't hitting that, do we need to be looking at them a little bit more and going, are they only going in there twice a day when one of the lovely staff members is at the front of the pen going along putting feed on? Is that what's signalling to them that they need to go and have a drink? Do we need to be doing more? So we're going to put some things into place. But the main little highlight I want to give to you is we can change the outcome of an animal at 5 days in the feeders. I've been doing the data on the lactations of these animals, and trust me, it's a big difference between whether they make it to that 3rd lactation or not based on how they act as a calf. We've always known that how you invest in a calf is how it's going to perform as a lactating animal. My study essentially just proves all my arguments with my siblings, and I am really pleased that it's going that way. So essentially, 5 days can make a massive difference to the production of an animal if we just put in some different management steps to do this. And if you have calf feeders or data, please talk to me.
Any questions for Sarah? I guess the question is, if I don't have a calf feeder, milk feeder, what's the takeaway? What do I do?
Your takeaway is the fact that the main things I've noticed have importance there is milk consumption and birth weight. Those are things that every calf has, regardless of what farm. I needed to do that because the farm I care most about does not have calf feeders. It has my mum. And if I can find a way to make her calves all go really well, and the reason we do have pretty great rates with our calving is we have one person, she's super consistent, she's super strict, she's going to make those animals survive. So what we want to do, and I'm trying to hustle the data out of this farm because they do feed manually, is look at the birth weight, weaning weight, and the consumption, and be able to line that up with this model to check that whether or not robots are the key factor. It's what I have for this data, but it doesn't mean the be all and end all. I can use this model for other farms. That's the dream weight. That's 12 week. Exactly. There is a parameter of where you want to be thinking. Like, so at this farm, they use a 200%, which I don't necessarily always agree with, because sometimes you get that 15 kilogram animal, get that really little preemie calf. That's not going to be really 30 kilos. You're not weaning that, are you? So my thing for those heavier calves is actually more looking at rate of gain, less so than how much we can make them gain, because there's a should we aspect of how big you want that heifer and how much competition she's going to then have on that farm. If she goes into the big pen after and she's 10 times the size of her conspecific, she's just going to knock them out of the way. She's going to keep growing, but do we want her to do that? So it's also working out how to control that. And that means with a robot, this is the advantage, you can alter their feed ration on the milk side of things so that they do focus more on the calf starter. So it would change their rate of gain, and you can do that through the robot there. Yeah, so for you it would just mean changing how you're feeding them and going, maybe it's time to wean you, which is self-directed weaning.
So you can't do it any earlier than 8 weeks, you would recommend weaning them for 8 weeks?
Look, if it's working on your farm, every farm is unique. We have calves on my farm that wean a little bit earlier, it happens. Just sometimes if you've got staff members, it's good to have, we do this at A, B, and C.
Thanks, we'll wrap it there just for time. Thank you very much, Sarah.